When a gymnast strikes the springboard, thousands of muscle fibers fire in precise sequence. In a fraction of a second, spatial awareness recalibrates midair, and the heart accelerates to pump oxygen to the limbs. This is biological coordination, the absolute requirement to integrate localized inputs into a systemic, whole-body survival response. But there is a mechanical paradox at play here. A biological organism must dodge a physical threat in milliseconds. However, it must also manage slow metabolic shifts and skeletal growth over a span of decades. One single control mechanism cannot do both optimally. The human body resolves this physiological problem by running two entirely distinct operating systems simultaneously. The first is the nervous system, a high-speed, localized, point-to-point electrical grid. The second is the endocrine system, a distributed wireless biochemical broadcast. Relying purely on an electrical grid would leave the body incapable of sustained, slow-release metabolic management. Conversely, relying entirely on chemical diffusion would mean dying from a predator before a reaction signal ever reached the legs. Both architectures are strictly necessary. The high-speed electrical network requires physical infrastructure. It relies on a specific biological wire. This diagram of a typical neuron outlines the exact hardware involved. Electrical impulses enter the dendrites, pass through the cell body, and exit down the axon. To ensure rapid transmission, a fatty myelin sheath insulates the axon, letting impulses physically jump between gaps. This wiring diagram reveals two main processing hubs. The central nervous system acts as the command center, while the peripheral nervous system consists of the actual cables branching outward into the tissues. By building physical pathways directly to individual muscle groups or specific glands, the nervous system achieves instantaneous control, intentionally trading wide-scale systemic reach for extreme localized speed. But a closed electrical grid is completely isolated without environmental data. Abstract physical phenomena, like sound waves or ambient light, must be translated into electrical impulses. Specialized receptors function as biological transducers to bridge this gap. This cross-section of the human ear illustrates the organ of Corti within the cochlea. Here, fluid pressure waves physically bend tiny hair cells, converting raw mechanical force into an electrical nerve impulse. Similarly, this diagram of the human eye shows the retina, where highly specialized photoreceptor cells, rods and cones, convert incoming photons directly into neural data, passed back to the optic nerve. Speed becomes the priority. This reflex arc demonstrates the network's velocity. A sensory neuron fires an impulse straight to the spinal cord. Because survival cannot wait for cognitive processing, an associative neuron immediately routes the signal down a motor neuron, entirely bypassing the brain. The reflex arc represents the ultimate hardware optimization. External threat data is converted into electrical defense protocols, triggering evasion before the brain registers pain. While immediate physical threats are managed by that wired electrical grid, long-term coordination requires a vastly different architecture, the endocrine system, biology's wireless broadcast network. This anatomical map highlights the major human endocrine glands. Unlike exocrine glands that secrete through localized tubes, these are ductless. They synthesize organic chemicals, called hormones, and pour them directly into the surrounding bloodstream. Hormones travel in the blood, triggering reactions only when colliding with precise receptor sites. This broadcast is regulated by a central node. Buried within the brain, the pituitary gland acts as the master controller, dictating the output of the entire network. A systemic disruption ripples across the organism. Oversecretion of growth hormone by the pituitary gland results in profound whole-body gigantism, evident in Nasir Sumro. The endocrine system accepts a severe delay in response time to achieve total, durable coverage, altering overarching metabolic states. When placed side by side, we can see exactly how these two distinct operating systems divide the labor of human homeostasis. This table compares the systems. The nervous system uses neurons to transmit electrical impulses, triggering instant muscle contractions. The chemical system uses the vascular network for hormonal fluids, driving slow, permanent alterations like bone growth. During a crisis, these separate systems lock into a unified protocol. The nervous system executes immediate physical movements. Simultaneously, the adrenal glands broadcast a surge of adrenaline, a chemical that dilates pupils and accelerates heart output across the organism to support sudden exertion. Human survival requires both topologies. The electrical grid handles immediate, localized precision, while the chemical bath meticulously calibrates the slow, systemic environment. A systemic chemical broadcast poses a severe engineering challenge. If a hormone is continually pumped into the circulating blood, the physiological response will escalate until the organism fails. The signal must have a mechanism to terminate itself. Biology solves this with a control loop known as the negative feedback mechanism. This is a cybernetic principle where the output of a specific process acts as the direct trigger to shut that exact process down. This diagram details the classical example: insulin regulation. When carbohydrates are digested after a meal, the initial stimulus is a rapid spike in blood glucose levels. Specialized sensor cells within the pancreas, the islets of Langerhans, detect this chemical shift and begin their broadcast, secreting insulin straight into the vascular system. Insulin forces the body's cells to absorb the glucose. As glucose leaves the blood, the systemic concentration drops back to baseline. The pancreas senses this return to normal and automatically halts the insulin broadcast. The loop gracefully closes itself. This self-regulating cycle is so vital that when the pancreatic nodes fail to produce insulin, the feedback loop shatters. Before the synthesis of commercial insulin in the 1920s, this single systemic failure was universally fatal. Having a brain is not enough to maintain life. True biological coordination is the seamless integration of a high-speed, localized electrical grid operating perfectly inside a self-regulating chemical bath. The organism survives because these two parallel architectures continually read, react, and adjust to internal and external realities, operating flawlessly and entirely beneath the threshold of conscious thought.